The moment I told my family I was gay, my world shattered. But when my own brother twisted the knife deeper with his betrayal, I never expected my best friend Benjamin to be the one who would piece me back together. I stood in the living room of our modest two-story house in suburban Denver, the Sunday roast still warm on the table. My father's face turned the color of the gravy, and my mother covered her mouth as if I had just cursed the entire bloodline. "You can't be serious, Axel," Dad said, his voice low and final. "Not in this house." Ethan, my older brother, sat there with that half-smile I used to trust. He didn't say a word while Dad pointed at the door and told me to pack. I thought Ethan would speak up. He always had my back growing up, but he just stared at his plate like the potatoes were more important than his little brother. By midnight, I was on the sidewalk with one duffel bag and the keys to my beat-up Honda. The porch light clicked off behind me like a period at the end of 25 years. I drove until the city lights blurred, pulled into a cheap motel off I-25, and cried until my ribs hurt. The next morning my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "You brought this on yourself, man. Don't drag Mom and Dad through your mess." I stared at the screen until the words stopped making sense. I had a decent job at a downtown marketing firm, but word travels fast in a city that still feels like a small town when it wants to. By Wednesday, the whispers started in the break room. Someone had posted an anonymous prayer request on the company Slack about a young man struggling with sin. I knew who wrote it. Ethan worked 2 floors up in accounting. He never looked me in the eye when we passed in the elevator. That Friday, I was called into HR. "We're restructuring," they said. Translation, "We don't want the drama." I walked out with 2 weeks severance and the taste of metal in my mouth. The apartment lease was in my name only, but rent was due in 10 days and my savings were already thin from helping Ethan with his truck payment last month. I sat on the floor of my empty living room, furniture still in boxes, and wondered how everything could collapse so fast. I scrolled through old photos until I landed on one from college. Benjamin and me at graduation, arms around each other, laughing like the future was ours to waste. He had moved to Seattle 3 years ago for a graphic design gig. We texted every few weeks, but life got busy. I typed a message, deleted it, typed again. Finally I hit send. "Hey man, rough week. You free to talk?" His reply came in under a minute. "Axel, what happened? I'm booking a flight right now." I laughed through fresh tears. Benjamin had always been the one who showed up. I just never knew how much I would need him until the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally decided I was disposable. The next 48 hours passed in a haze of Craigslist ads and cheap coffee. I found a room for rent in Capitol Hill, moved in with nothing but the duffel and a folding chair. The roommate was a quiet nurse named Lena who didn't ask questions. I lay on the air mattress that first night listening to traffic and trying to convince myself I was going to be okay. Then the doorbell rang at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. I opened it and there stood Benjamin. Tall, dark hair longer than I remembered, carrying a duffel of his own and that crooked smile that used to make every bad day better. "You look like hell," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Good thing I brought Thai food and bad movies. We ate on the floor because I didn't have a table yet. He didn't push for details right away. He just listened when I finally spilled everything, the dinner, the text, the job, the way my own brother chose the family image over me. When I finished, Benjamin set his container down and looked at me for a long moment. "You're not alone in this, Axel. Not anymore." That night we stayed up until 3 talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest loosened. I didn't know it yet, but Benjamin's return was only the beginning of the storm that would either break me completely or finally set me free. The first week with Benjamin in the apartment felt like stepping back into college, except the stakes were so much higher. He took the couch without complaint, folding his 6-foot frame into the cushions every night like it was the Ritz. In the mornings he made coffee strong enough to wake the dead and slid a mug across the counter with a quiet, "You're still here. That's a win." I started applying for jobs with a knot in my stomach. Every cover letter felt like lying because I couldn't mention why I left my last position. Benjamin sat beside me at the tiny kitchen table, editing my resume on his laptop. "You're a damn good strategist, Axel. Don't let them make you forget that." His voice was steady, but I caught the way his jaw tightened when I told him about the anonymous Slack post. Ethan called once. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. "Mom's crying again. You gonna fix this or what?" I played it for Benjamin. He listened twice, then deleted it. "That's not your job anymore." We fell into a rhythm. Benjamin worked remote, sketching logos while I scrolled job boards. In the evenings we walked the neighborhood, past rainbow flags and coffee shops full of people who looked like they belonged. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Benjamin to realize I was too much baggage and book a ticket back to Seattle. He never did. One Thursday I came home from an interview that had gone nowhere and found him cooking stir-fry. The smell of ginger and garlic filled the tiny space. "Bad day?" he asked without turning around. I nodded and sank into the chair. He set a plate in front of me and sat across, waiting. I told him about the hiring manager who asked if I was the right cultural fit. Benjamin's fork paused mid-air. "They don't deserve you." That night we watched an old documentary about Stonewall. Halfway through Benjamin said softly, "I wish I'd been there for you sooner." I looked at him, really looked. The city lights through the window caught the side of his face, and for a second, he looked like the 18-year-old who had driven me home after my first heartbreak and told me I deserved better. Something in my chest shifted, but I shoved it down. This was friendship. I couldn't afford to lose that too. The next morning my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Your father says not to come for Thanksgiving." "I'm sorry, honey." I read it 3 times before the words stopped swimming. Benjamin saw my face and didn't ask. He just grabbed his keys. "Road trip. You and me. No destination." We drove into the mountains until the air smelled like pine. At a pull-off overlooking the valley we sat on the hood of the car and shared a bag of chips. "I keep thinking if I had just stayed quiet," I said. Benjamin shook his head. "Then you'd still be lying to everyone, including yourself." "That's not living, Axel." The sun dropped behind the peaks and the sky turned the color of bruised peaches. For the first time, I let myself feel the full weight of what I had lost. Benjamin didn't try to fix it. He just sat there, shoulder against mine, and that was enough. When we got back to the apartment that night, I fell asleep on the couch before the movie ended. I woke to a blanket tucked around me and Benjamin's voice murmuring on the phone in the kitchen. "Yeah, he's holding up, but he shouldn't have to do it alone." I pretended to stay asleep because hearing him defend me to someone, probably his mom, made my throat close up. The job offers were still 0. Savings were bleeding out. Yet every time I looked at Benjamin across the room, sketching with that focused frown, something inside me whispered that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as broken as I felt. 2 months in, and the apartment no longer felt temporary. Benjamin hung a string of fairy lights above the couch and bought a secondhand coffee table from a neighbor down the hall. I landed a freelance gig writing social media copy for a local nonprofit. Nothing glamorous, but it paid rent. We celebrated with cheap wine and takeout tacos on the new table. That night Benjamin told me about the guy he dated in Seattle. It didn't work because he wanted someone who didn't carry their past around like a backpack. He laughed, but the sound was hollow. I wanted to ask what kind of past he meant, but the question stuck. Instead I said, "You deserve someone who sees the whole backpack and still sticks around." He looked at me then, eyes unreadable, and changed the subject. My mother started texting again. Small things at first. "Saw your cousin's wedding photos. The dog misses you." I answered politely but kept my distance. Ethan never reached out. I told myself I didn't care. One Saturday we volunteered at a Pride Center food drive. Benjamin wore a shirt that read "Love is Love" in rainbow letters and looked completely at ease handing out canned goods. I caught myself staring at the way his shoulders moved when he laughed with the kids. When our shift ended, he slung an arm around my neck like old times. "Not bad for a couple of Denver boys, huh?" His touch lingered a second longer than usual. My pulse did something complicated. Back home, I took a long shower and tried to talk sense into myself. Benjamin was my safety net, not a romantic option. I couldn't risk the only stable thing in my life for a crush that might ruin everything. The next week, the nonprofit offered me a full-time position. I came home buzzing and found Benjamin on the couch with his laptop open to a one-way ticket to Seattle. My stomach dropped. "You leaving?" The words came out sharper than I intended. He closed the laptop slowly. "My boss wants me back for a big project. But I told him I need to think about it." "Why?" "Because you're here, Axel." He said it so quietly the city noise almost swallowed it. We stared at each other across the living room. The fairy lights blurred in my vision. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Benjamin stood, crossed the room, and pulled me into a hug that felt different from every hug we'd ever shared. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me it's okay." That night, I lay awake listening to his breathing from the couch. The realization hit me like a freight train. I was falling for my best friend. And I had no idea if he was falling too. The new job came with health insurance and a desk that faced a window overlooking the mountains. I started wearing button-downs again and felt almost normal. Benjamin celebrated by cooking actual vegetables for once. We fell into a new rhythm. Morning runs together, late-night talks about everything except the thing hanging between us. Then Ethan showed up at my office. Security called up saying my brother was in the lobby. I met him downstairs in the courtyard. He looked thinner, eyes bloodshot. "Mom's in the hospital," he said without greeting. "Stress. Doctor says her heart's acting up." Guilt slammed into me so hard I had to sit on the concrete ledge. Ethan kept talking. How Dad blamed me. How the church prayer chain knew everything. How he had only been trying to help the family heal. I listened until I couldn't. "You outed me at work, Ethan. You got me fired. That's not helping." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I thought if they knew, they'd pray for you." I stood up. "Pray for me somewhere else." That night, I told Benjamin everything. He listened, then said, "You don't owe them forgiveness on their timeline." But the next morning, I drove to the hospital anyway. Mom looked small in the bed. Dad stood by the window like a statue. I stayed 10 minutes. No one mentioned why I left home. When I got back, Benjamin was waiting with coffee and no questions. He just opened his arms and I walked into them. Work started getting harder. A new client pulled out after learning about my lifestyle. My boss pulled me aside. "Keep it professional, Axel." I nodded, but inside I was screaming. Benjamin found me on the fire escape that evening staring at the city lights. "They don't get to define you," he said. His hand brushed mine and stayed there. I turned to him. "What if I want more than friendship, Ben?" The words were out before I could stop them. He didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped closer until our foreheads almost touched. "Then you're not the only one." The kiss was soft, tentative, everything a first kiss between two terrified men should be. When we broke apart, he smiled like the sun coming up. "Took you long enough." For 3 perfect weeks, we lived in a bubble. Stolen kisses in the kitchen, hands finding each other under blankets during movies, quiet confessions in the dark. Benjamin told me he had been in love with me since sophomore year but was too scared to lose me. I admitted I had been blind. Life felt possible again. Then the bubble popped. Ethan posted a long Facebook rant about the gay agenda destroying families. Tagged me. Comments flooded in, old high school classmates, distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years. My work inbox filled with concerned messages from colleagues. Someone at the nonprofit suggested I take a leave for the team's sake. I came home shaking. Benjamin read the post and went very still. "We'll handle it together," but doubt crept in. What if my mess dragged him down too? What if loving me meant losing his own family someday? I started pulling away, working late, going for runs alone, sleeping on the couch again. Benjamin noticed. "Talk to me, Axel." One night it exploded. "I can't keep doing this if it costs you everything," I said. You deserve someone whose life isn't a battlefield. He looked at me like I had slapped him. You think I don't know what I signed up for? I chose you years ago. We didn't speak for 2 days. The silence was worse than any fight. On the third morning, I woke to find him gone. Duffel missing. Note on the counter. I need air. Don't disappear on me. Panic clawed up my throat. I called him 20 times. Voicemail. I drove to the park where we had our first real talk after he arrived. He was sitting on the same bench, staring at the mountains. When he saw me, he stood. I'm not leaving you, Axel. But you have to stop running. We talked for hours. I cried. He held me. We made promises, not perfect ones, but real ones. That night we slept in the same bed for the first time, just holding each other, no pressure, no rush. Spring arrived with warmer winds and decisions that couldn't wait. I quit the nonprofit before they could ask me to leave and started my own small marketing consultancy focused on LGBTQ-owned businesses. Benjamin stayed in Denver, turning down the Seattle promotion. My home is where you are, he said simply. We drove to the mountains one last time and scattered the ashes of every fear I had carried. On the way back, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. I miss you, she whispered. I told her I missed her too, but I wouldn't come back until I was welcome as I am. She cried. I didn't promise anything more. Ethan never apologized, but one afternoon a package arrived. My old high school baseball glove and a note. I was wrong. Take care of yourself. I read it twice, then put it in a drawer. Some bridges stay burned. Benjamin and I stood on our tiny balcony watching the city lights come on. He slipped his arms around my waist from behind. Proud of you, he murmured against my neck. I turned in his arms and kissed him slow and sure, the kind of kiss that says forever without needing words. Looking back, the disownment, the betrayal, the months of fear, they all led me here, to a life I chose instead of one handed to me. I still carry scars, but they no longer define me. Benjamin taught me that chosen family isn't a consolation prize. Sometimes it's the real prize all along. True or false? Family bonds can never be replaced by chosen family?